committed an additional $55 billion to Ukraine just a week ago or 10 days ago, I think, waiting for us to leave. They said, we're out of time, Ukraine's out of bullets, and so we're going to do what we need to do, is what our colleagues in Europe said. But listen, it's not just countries that are in Putin's backyard that are doing this. It's not just countries who think, well, if they can do it to Ukraine, they might do it to us. Our coalition includes Australia, includes Japan, includes South Korea. In fact, Japan just pledged another $4.5 billion for Ukraine. That is a lot of money for a country that's as far from Kyiv as Japan is from Ukraine. But our partners know what the stakes are for democracy in this battle. They know that supporting Ukraine means standing with people that are willing to fight, to do whatever it takes to live in a free country like ours. But as I said, Ukraine is running out of bullets. And Putin may be having a tough time on the Ukrainian battlefield, to put it mildly, compared to what anybody would have reasonably expected. But the battlefield he's counting on winning on is the battlefield here on Capitol Hill. He knows how divided we are. He knows that this Capitol is filled with self-defeating division. And the question he's asking, and the question we need to ask ourselves, is whether we're going to allow that division to stand in the way of our support for Ukraine. He can read our newspapers. He knows how to troll us on social media. And just in the 4 months that we've been having this debate, by the way, I think we should have passed this in October. Just in the 4 months we've been debating this, and that we've consumed debating this aid, Putin has taken back territory that the Ukrainians spilt blood to gain. And his soldiers have killed or injured over 1,500 Ukrainian civilians. Russia is killing or badly wounding 30,000 Ukrainian troops every month. And as we gather here today, Putin is, right now, today, Putin is massing 40,000 soldiers, 500 tanks, and 650 armored vehicles to conquer yet another Ukrainian city. And Ukrainian troops are digging in, as they have all winter long, to fight back. But they're outgunned, they're outmanned. They've got to ration their ammunition because they don't know whether the bullets are coming again. They don't know whether they're going to get the support they need. And Putin thinks he can beat Ukraine, not because he thinks the Ukrainians are weak, because he thinks we're weak. He thinks we're weak. And it's not just Putin who thinks that American democracy can't meet the challenge. His autocratic allies across the world believe the same thing. And it's important, as the senator from New Hampshire was saying, Senator Shaheen, to see how interconnected, to use her word, these things are. Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine connects directly to Iran's aggression across the Middle East, to China's saber-rattling against Taiwan and the Philippines, and North Korea's missile launches. Putin is killing Ukrainians today with Iranian and North Korean missiles in this very war. And China supplies critical components to Moscow to regenerate Russia's defense production, and helps keep the Kremlin able to avoid or escape our sanctions. And for its part, Hamas used weapons from China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia to murder 1,200 people in Israel on October 7th. And as everybody in this chamber knows from what's going on just this week, Iran is backing militants in Iraq and Syria who just killed U.S. soldiers in Jordan. Tehran is bankrolling the Houthis, whose attacks in the Red Sea have caused shipping prices to jump, inflicting higher costs on Americans. And of course, China is funding billions of dollars to the dictator in North Korea who supplies weapons to fight this very war against the Ukrainian people. The threats these powers pose are connected and overlapping. From Putin to Xi, these dictators have made it clear, and they've said it at the negotiating table over and over again in the last decade, that they believe that democracy is exhausted and that totalitarianism is the best that humanity can expect. This Congress's failure to fund Ukraine, if it comes to that, will send a powerful signal to them that they are right and that democracy is in decline, at least in the United States of America. And despite all of this, despite all of these stakes, I've heard people in both this chamber and in the House of Representatives question whether this fight really matters to the American people. Failing to support Ukraine means showing the world that the United States, long the leader of the free world, is no longer capable of standing up for the post-World War II order, our values, and for our partners. We can't accept the implications of that for our future or for our children's future. And fortunately, we have an amazing example in front of us right now in the Ukrainian people, because their courage, their ingenuity, their stamina have reminded us that humans will actually die for democracy. They will fight authoritarianism until it is destroyed, until it is dismantled. And they have fought and inspired people all over the world to support them in their fight. Not to send soldiers or to sacrifice our lives, but to send arms, to send intelligence. Are we willing to say, after all of that, over the past 2 years, are we willing to say that we have no stake in this outcome? That we are indifferent to Putin's aggression or the meaning to the free world if he is successful in his illegal and criminal invasion of a free country in Europe? If we fail to fund Ukraine, that's not going to end this war. That's an invitation for Putin to continue this war. And he will impose his will on the Ukrainian people. And dictators everywhere will see that they have a green light, that they can inhabit a world where might makes right, where people don't have the benefits of freedom or the rule of law, but get up every day just to fight off the kind of mayhem that the Ukrainian people are fighting today. That world would be a lot more dangerous than the one we're in today. And we do not want to embolden Putin or his allies to believe that they can do to other places what they did to Ukraine. As the senator from New Hampshire said, Putin could march into NATO like his allies have said, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. And then Article 5 would be invoked, and then we're involved, and our people are involved. And if he actually won this war, Putin could use his leverage over Ukrainian wheat and Ukrainian energy to dictate terms to people all over this world who rely on those important commodities. And let me tell you something else, and this is not some totally hypothetical parade of horribles. We look at this every day on the Intelligence Committee. Xi Jinping is watching this, and he's considering what this means for what he intends to do with Taiwan, whether he wants to plunge the Indo-Pacific into war, shocking the global economy and drawing American soldiers into that theater. Letting Putin win, giving Putin the green light, is going to take us down this road. It's as predictable as the sun rising tomorrow. And that's why, let me close, because I know the Senator from Maryland is here. Let me close by saying this. And I want to say this especially to the people in this chamber who've sort of taken a more isolationist tack than the one that we're taking today, who may not believe that the United States has the same essential role to play that I believe the United States has to play, partly because of my family's own experience and my mother having been born in Warsaw, a Polish Jew in 1938, and what that means to me about American leadership. But let me say, if you are somebody who believes that the United States should be less entangled abroad and more focused at home, you ought to ask them if you can vote for Ukraine twice. Twice. Because the world's going to be less safe for the American people if we fail to do this. I know that many of my Senate Republican colleagues understand the historic nature of this moment, and Democrats as well, and believe that we should extend our support for Ukraine along with our partners, including Israel and Taiwan. And they're right. And let me say, no friend of Israel or Taiwan should turn away from Ukraine. Ukraine's battle is their battle. Ukraine's fight is their fight, Mr. President. And I hope our colleagues in the House will come to appreciate that as well, and that we'll have a big bipartisan vote here and a big bipartisan vote in the House, and we will recommit each other, maybe, to overcoming the dysfunction that we've had, surprise ourselves on the upside for once around here, and send an important signal to the rest of the world. I'll finish with this. In his first meeting with us, Mr. President, and I know my colleagues remember this was still COVID when this was happening, President Zelensky was on the computer, just like any other Zoom call that any of us had during COVID. And he said to us, "We are fighting to live our lives the way you live your lives." The last time he spoke to us, and it was in person this time, he came here, we met in the old Senate chamber. The last time he spoke to us, he said, "We need your help, we need your bullets, we need your support, but if you fail to support us, we will never stop fighting." Because, as Senator Shaheen said, our entire enterprise is based on the idea that we're going to fight for freedom. We're never going to stop fighting. He did say we'd lose. We can't beat Putin without your help, but we will never stop fighting for freedom. I thought that was a very honest thing for him to say. I thought he could have said easily, "We'll give up." Instead, what he said was, "You may decide not to stand for freedom, but even if you fail us, we won't give up." We can't fail Ukraine. This is no time for Congress to play politics with people's lives, no matter where they live, whether they live in Denver or in Kyiv or in the Middle East, or New Hampshire, or Maryland, or Connecticut, or Taipei. We won't get a second chance, Mr. President. This is a test of America's resolve, and this is a call for American leadership, and we cannot fail it. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
The senior senator from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank Senator Bennett for those comments. Senator Shaheen, thank you for organizing this opportunity for us to talk about the importance of this bill. But I must tell you, it's been a long road. And there were times where I think we thought we would not be able to get this aid package to the floor of the United States Senate. And the senator from Colorado was one of the strongest voices that we had to make sure we never gave up. We were disappointed many, many times over many months. And Senator Shaheen has been in the forefront, serving both on Armed Services and Senate Foreign Relations, to make sure, again, that we kept the momentum moving forward to get this done. Even last night, when we thought that there was an impediment that we could not overcome, we looked at the votes on the board and said, it doesn't look like we're going to get there. We said, Senator Shaheen said, Senator Bennett said, Senator Blumenthal said, we can't give up. You know, I had the honor of chairing the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and the presiding officer is one of our distinguished members. There is no more important foreign policy priority than getting this bill passed and signed by the president. It is our #1 priority for our national security. You've heard my colleagues talk about the fact that this is not about Russia versus Ukraine. That's what this war immediately is about. But it's about the free world democracy versus autocracy. And yes, 2 years ago, how many of us thought that President Zelensky would still be alive, let alone president of a viable country, Ukraine? The will and fighting spirit of the Ukrainian people is to be admired. Their leadership has been incredible, and they are the ones that have been able to hold back the big Russian army. But they couldn't do it without our support. Yes, they'll still fight, but they can't hold back that type of force unless they have the ammunition and the weapons and the support that they need in order to carry on this battle. And when I said it's not a fight between Russia and Ukraine, we have a coalition of the democratic powers of the world all working to help Ukraine, Europe and throughout the global community. And I think sometimes it's lost because our constituents think this is just the United States coming to Ukraine's aid. Europe collectively provides more help than we do as a nation. We are the largest single contributor. They can't do it without our expertise, our help, and our resources and our equipment. We know that. But look who's on the other side. Who is supporting Russia? It's Iran, it's North Korea, and yes, it's the People's Republic of China. They're the ones supporting Russia's efforts. Yes, this supplemental is interconnected. What's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in the China Seas, what's happening with Taiwan, all related to whether democracies can prevail. We have so much at stake. And yesterday I was so disappointed because of the vote that took place. Today I see some light here. But let's take advantage of this. We have momentum. Let's make sure we get this bill passed. And why is it so important? There is no question in any of our minds that Russia will not stop its military operations at Ukraine's border. Russian troops are already in Moldova and Georgia because of earlier incursions similar to what happened with Crimea and Ukraine. Does any of us think that they are not going to try to take over those countries as they did Ukraine? And then take a look at the Baltic countries, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. Used to be part of Russia, at least they claim. We never recognized that. They're now NATO allies, and great NATO allies. Mr. Putin wants to take over those countries. Poland, he wants to take over Poland, the countries that border, and he doesn't stop there. This really is an alignment of the world. And it's so critically important that the United States is the leader in this effort on behalf of democracy. It's not only the money that's important, it's not only the ammunition and the munitions that are important, it's U.S. leadership, because it's a clear signal that we are going to triumph, that Ukraine will triumph and democracy will triumph. So we really need to understand the importance of this action. Mr. President, I've been honored to be a member of this body now for 18 years. This is my 18th year in the United States Senate. This is perhaps the most important bill I will cast, vote I will cast as the United States Senator. That's just how important this issue is for us to get done. And I'm proud of many of the issues that we've taken up during my years in the United States Senate. That's how important it is for us to get this done. And yes, we need to make sure that we stop the Iranian proxies in the Middle East, because they are all part of this. Yes, we could be drawn into a conflict because of what's happening on the Red Sea, or what the Hezbollah is doing on Israel's northern border, or Iran's activities and proxies in Iraq. We know that. We've got to act with dispatch, urgency. In Ukraine, the case is that they don't have enough ammunition. They're rationing ammunition today. There are Ukrainian villages, as we speak on the floor of the United States Senate, that are at risk of being taken over by Russia forces because they don't have the munitions they need and the support they need, including from the United States of America. This has been a great investment. How many of us thought that the monies that we invested over the last 2 years would lead to blocking the Russian military? But it's done that. And yes, it's real that the alternative to money could be U.S. military. Our sons and daughters over fighting in Europe once again. Look at history. Look at what happened in the 1930s. Look what led up to World War II. You see some dangerous comparisons that are taking place. We need to be on the right side of history. And the right side of history is to make sure the supplemental is passed with dispatch. There are so many other issues in here that are critically important. We need to make sure that humanitarian assistance is there. And we need to make sure that at the end of the day, Russia's held accountable for what they have done. War crimes. They've committed genocide. They tried to wipe the Ukrainian culture off the face of the earth. Sound familiar? World War II? They have to be held accountable. They have to be held accountable financially for the damage they've caused to Ukraine. I am proud of the bill we were able to pass in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, known as the repo bill. I congratulate Senator Whitehouse and Senator Risch for their leadership on that. It also includes the Global Center. It also includes the atrocities prevention. We need to make sure that we have a comprehensive way to make sure Russia is held accountable for what they have done. But it starts with supporting Ukraine to defend itself and to win this war of aggression that Russia has started, and make it clear that we're there in the Middle East. There is no future for security of Israel or the Palestinians with Hamas in control. They have to be eliminated. The proxies in Iran have to be neutralized. And yes, in the Indo-Pacific, we must stand with our ally Taiwan so there is no military action taken by the People's Republic of China against Taiwan. All that's in this bill. And that's why this bill is so critically important that we get to the finish line. So, Mr. President, I urge my colleagues, we had a good vote a little while ago. We're not at the finish line in the United States Senate. The next step is let's be reasonable and find a reasonable path forward to get this bill done, I hope within the next day or two. Send it over to the House of Representatives and hope that our colleagues in the House will follow the lead of the United States Senate, Democrats and Republicans working together to get a bill done for our national security. And then, Mr. President, I hope we can get back to border security, because we know our immigration system needs that and we need border security. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senior senator from Connecticut.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm grateful to my colleague, Senator Shaheen of New Hampshire, as well as Senator Bennett of Colorado, Senator Cardin of Maryland, and I will be followed by Senator Peters of Michigan. We are among a group, but we are hardly the only ones who feel so passionately about this issue. For anyone who has visited Ukraine, and I've been there 4 times over the last couple of years, seeing and hearing are so powerfully inspiring, so deeply moving. I will never forget my first visit after the invasion when I went to President Zelensky's office, really a bunker, and spoke to him about what it was like to have the Russians literally 10 minutes away by car from his door. And then I went to Bucha, where I saw the remains of Russian tanks, where they were stopped by Ukrainians using handheld missiles in the snow against these huge weapons of war. But simply by dint of their courage and indomitable spirit, they stopped the Russians, but only at Kyiv's doorstep. President Zelensky told me then, and he's told me since, we will fight with pitchfork if we need to. We don't need your soldiers. We need your help. We need the military equipment that you can provide. He told us they needed more javelins, and we provided them later than we should have. He said we need HIMARS artillery. He said we need ATACMS, and we provided them later than we should have. Bradley and Stryker vehicles. Again, we provided them later than we should have. And of course, Abrams tanks and F-16s. They are there or on the way. Later, but we did the right thing. Winston Churchill once said, America always does the right thing after it tries everything else. An exaggeration, but there is a kernel of truth in Winston Churchill's comment, which is, we are often late in doing the right thing. And now we have no more margin of error in Ukraine. Deliveries of weapons are 1/3 of what they were only 7 months ago. And the failure to appropriate funds here means that that supply of arms will be at 10% of what it was. I've met those veterans, Ukrainian soldiers, who have fought on the front, who described to me what it means to be fighting against the entrenched Russian forces, landmines, their artillery, pouring onto the Ukrainian troops, shells and drones that keep them at constant risk and force them back when they have sought to make advances. And they have made advances, and they've been successful on the front, both in the east and in the south. It has been yard by yard, mile by mile, moving forward, sometimes pushed back, and the Russians laying waste to whole cities. I've also visited Bucha and Irpin. We know what happened in Mariupol. The killing in Bucha was an atrocity that the world should never forget. Men and women and children. Hands tied behind their backs, shot in the head, and then buried in mass graves that I saw. Talking to people who live in Bucha, whose memories will be seared forever, and their children traumatized by these Russian atrocities. Vladimir Putin is a war criminal. There is a warrant for his arrest, rightly, from the International Court of Criminal Justice. There should be warrants for arrest for all of the Russian officials who have participated in taking children from Ukraine by the thousands, tens of thousands, and then indoctrinating them, re-educating them in Russia or Belarus. Russia has launched an unprovoked, criminal, murderous attack on a nation that constitutes genocide. Those people in Bucha and in many other places around Ukraine were killed for one reason alone. They are Ukrainian. The world's outrage is well-founded. Many of my colleagues have expressed that same outrage. Senators are good at summoning outrage in words that are far more eloquent than mine, but we will be judged not by our words, but by our action. We will be rightly judged by history as to what we do or what we fail to do here. And we have missed opportunities in Ukraine before. The senator from New Hampshire will recall well our efforts after the first invasion, when Russia seized a huge part of Ukraine. And a bipartisan effort was made in the Armed Services Committee to provide more lethal aid to Ukraine so that it could use it before this second invasion to push back the Russians and show that we could deter them. And after my first visit to Ukraine, which was a little bit before the second invasion, I came back and I said to anyone who would listen, including the President of the United States, the only way to deter Putin is with force, delivery of what Ukraine needs to defend itself. Vladimir Putin is a thug. He understands only force. And unfortunately, we missed that opportunity. The second invasion occurred 2 years ago, and the effects in Ukraine are visible, again, to anyone who would visit. Bombed out buildings, transformers for power destroyed, Ukraine's delivery of grain to a world that needs more food blocked. These effects are not abstract, and they are not limited to Ukraine. There are a lot of people in the United States who watch what they see on TV, and the images are horrifying. And their reaction is, of course, thank goodness it isn't here. And thank goodness it doesn't affect us. Well, the fact of the matter is, it affects Americans. It affects all of our allies. It affects the supply of energy and the cost of it and the effect on the world economy. It affects the availability of grain. Ukraine is the breadbasket of many parts of the world, and the cost of food. It affects the diplomatic relations of nations. And ultimately, it will affect our men and women in uniform. Right now, President Zelensky can fight and win without men and women from America on the ground. But if he keeps going, and he will keep going if he wins, he's told it to us, we have only to listen to him, it will be Poland or Romania or Moldova or Finland and Sweden. Does anyone have any doubt about why Finland and Sweden want to be part of NATO? After years of neutrality, it is simply fear of Russia and Vladimir Putin's savage, indomitable appetite for more territory and his long-range vision for restoring the Russian Empire and the old Soviet Union. So anybody who thinks that what happens in Ukraine has no effect on America, you are in denial. Anyone who argues that we should be repairing our roads or building more schools or providing more food and heat for people who need it in America, you are right, but not at the expense of our national security. We can do both. We have done both. And throughout American history, there have been people who have said, let's pull back. Let's care only what happens within our shores. And they've been proved wrong by history because of their denial. And ultimately, America has done the right thing, as it did in World War II, as it has done again and again and again by defending freedom and democracy. This imperative is a moral obligation. It is a political necessity, but it is also a national security imperative. The arms that we deliver to Ukraine already have helped degrade the Russian military by 1/2. Talk to our military leaders about the effect on Russia's military of Ukraine's defense. It has degraded the Russian armed forces by 1/2, and we've invested less than 5% of our military budget without a single American casualty, not a single American in uniform, killed or wounded. That is an investment that we need to continue, because the alternative is for us to be putting our troops on the ground there to defend, under our NATO obligation, those countries that will be invaded next, whether it's Poland, Romania, Moldova, or Finland and Sweden. Let me say finally, I was very proud yesterday to vote for a supplemental that served our national security. Our national security in Ukraine, our national security interests in Israel. It is defending itself against a terrorist organization that wants to eradicate Israel and annihilate the Jewish people. And it is doing so at our urging, with pressure from the United States, with reduced civilian casualties, more humanitarian aid, and maybe most important, working toward a pause to bring home the hostages. Some are American. And our security interests in Taiwan, in the southeast, where, again, an aggressor threatens the rule of law and the order that we've established. And, of course, national security at the border. We need to control the border. Our immigration system is broken. We need comprehensive immigration reform, but we need steps now to reform a completely shredded system at the border. But this cause of Ukraine should bring us together, and has brought us together. When we first started 10 years ago in the Armed Services Committee, one of our leaders was John McCain. I've traveled to Ukraine with Senator Graham. We have been part of a bipartisan movement. It should bring us together as Republicans and Democrats. There should be no red or blue part of it. And I know let me just say finally, that the people of America at heart are with us. I know that the Ukrainian community in Connecticut has stood steadfast, has been such an example. When I've told President Zelensky about the strong support from our Ukrainian community, his eyes have lighted up. And that is true throughout America. Ukrainians have remained steadfast in their loyalty to the freedom of their country. And they have been inspired, as have we. Vladimir Putin is counting on us to fail. He believes democracies are decrepit and corrupt. He thinks that an autocratic dictatorship is superior, that everyday people don't know how to govern themselves, that he can continue to divide us by misinformation and disinformation. He's wrong. Let's prove him wrong. Let's do it without delay. Let's do the right thing without doing everything else first. I thank my colleagues, and I'm proud to stand with them today to urge that both chambers pass this supplemental as quickly as possible. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Michigan.
Mr. President, yesterday the Senate considered legislation that would have provided critical aid to our allies and provide resources and authorities to secure our northern and southern borders. The legislation was forged by good faith, bipartisan negotiations. But instead of coming together to advance a vital border security bill, my Republican colleagues blocked it from receiving any further debate and potential modification. My Republican colleagues voted against advancing legislation that would make meaningful changes at our border for the first time in decades. It would have provided the personnel, the resources, and authorities needed to secure our borders, address regional migration trends, and support lawful trade and travel that drives our economy. I serve as chairman of the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee when I've worked to advance several bipartisan bills to secure our borders. But the legislation we had yesterday was rejected by my Republican colleagues, which would have addressed some of the most pressing challenges at the southern border and actually take them on immediately. The bill would have allowed us to hire more CBP officers and agents, the men and women who are on the ground protecting our national security and managing our border crossings. It would have provided resources to install more advanced screening technology, tools that help identify illegal cargo and stop dangerous drugs like fentanyl from reaching our communities. It would have helped the federal government go after criminal organizations that traffic harmful drugs across the border. The bill also aimed to streamline the process for asylum seekers arriving at our southern border while ensuring individuals who do not qualify are quickly removed. It would have helped to ensure that unaccompanied children who arrive at the border, some of the most vulnerable people in our immigration system, have access to counsel. And it would have established a pathway to permanent residence for Afghan allies who risk their lives in the defense of our national security. Now, the bill wasn't perfect. It was not meant to be a comprehensive immigration reform, but it was a bipartisan effort to address the challenges that we are now seeing at the southern border. And that's why the National Border Patrol Council, which represents frontline border security professionals, fully supported it. And they urged us to take action. They needed these tools. They were crying out, please, give us these tools at the border. The conservative editorial board of the Wall Street Journal put it simply in their headline, and it was, quote, a border security bill worth passing. Republicans in Congress initially demanded border security measures to be part of this bill. But in the minute that we actually had a strong bipartisan security bill, on the floor, they decided to walk away. Maybe it's because they've been listening to former President Trump, who publicly fought to sink this bipartisan effort. He doesn't care about making our border more secure or supporting our CBP agents on the front line or keeping fentanyl out of our communities. He only cares about his chances in November. And he thinks that if we solve this problem, it's going to hurt his election. Clearly, Republicans in Congress agreed, and they have made it abundantly clear that they would rather campaign on this issue than actually pass legislation to fix it. They would rather play politics and see themselves on TV and on their favorite network talking about it, rather than rolling up their sleeves and actually solving the problem. My colleagues who worked on this comprehensive bill set a much-needed example of bipartisanship. I'm proud to work alongside Senator Murphy in our caucus, and I'm grateful to serve as chairman of the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee and work closely with both Senators Sinema and Lankford. These are three committed lawmakers, people who did actually roll up their sleeves and actually work to get things done in a meaningful way. And I certainly appreciate their hard work in negotiating this comprehensive bill. We are all aware of the challenges we face at the southern border, and it's a shame that a vast majority of my Republican colleagues have decided not to act. We can still take a critical step to help our allies, however, who are now facing existential challenges. Our international partners are fighting for democracy. Ukraine is standing up to a reckless dictator and protecting its people from his violent campaign. In October, Israel weathered the deadliest terrorist attacks in its history. Taiwan continues to face aggression from the Chinese government. In order to help preserve democracy and stability on the global stage, the United States must stand at their side. We can send help to our international partners when they need it the most. It's been almost 2 years since Putin initiated his unprovoked war of aggression against Ukraine. In response, the Ukrainian people have shown incredible bravery and resolve. They've stood up in the face of this dictator to defend their sovereignty and their democracy. They're fighting a courageous battle, not only to protect their own country, but to show the world the importance of protecting liberty against an authoritarian regime. For months, Ukraine has needed the United States to help in this fight and provide more military assistance as they push back on Russian forces. And now we have an opportunity to move a bill forward that would send this critical aid to our ally. It will help the Ukrainian army get the weapons, the intelligence, and the training resources that they need to win this war. It will also include significant humanitarian aid, money that will go directly to those most immediately affected by this conflict. My home state of Michigan is home to a vibrant Ukrainian American community. Every day I hear from constituents who are urging the United States to act, and act soon. Not just to help Ukraine, but to defend democratic values all across the globe. If we fail to pass this legislation, it'll play right into Putin's hands. The Ukrainian victories will be nullified, their resolve will have been wasted, and their independent democracy will be in grave danger. We cannot and must not let that happen. I commend President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people for their response to Putin's invasion, and I implore my colleagues to pass the bill before us and send the aid that they so desperately need. We also now have the ability to send urgently needed resources to Israel in their fight against Hamas, and provide humanitarian aid to civilians in Gaza who have been caught in the crossfire of this conflict. Israelis are reeling from horrific attacks on October 7th, 4 months ago. Many families are still praying for the safe return of family members being held hostage by Hamas. Others are mourning their loved ones who were killed in the initial attack, and there's no question that the country will never ever be the same. I stand with Israel and all those in the region seeking peace and security. By passing this legislation, we can support both our key ally in the region and provide relief for innocent civilians in Gaza who have shouldered the burdens of this war. As we send this urgently needed support, I want to reiterate my calls for both parties to minimize civilian casualties and work towards a lasting peace. We had a chance to address all of these challenges at once yesterday, but unfortunately, a significant bipartisan agreement failed. Congressional Republicans decided they do not want to secure our border. But today, we can send help to our allies, and we can still help protect democracy across the world. The stakes are too high not to act. I urge my colleagues to vote for the bill before us now and join me in supporting this vital assistance.